don't have time to applaud. It's just way too much work. All right, so here's what I know. My job is to make games. I do a lot of it. I also write very precise puzzle text and game text and all that. I just put out, like you might have seen, I mostly do tabletop games. Oh, I'm Mike Selinker. Hi. I mostly do tabletop games. I do a fair number of mobile stuff and such, but I really enjoy writing tabletop games. And I find that every time I do something with a computer game design team, they're always like hovering over me going, how do we do this? How do we write this, right? Because you have this issue in tabletop games that you don't have in electronic games, in that it's very difficult to push a patch live, right? I mean, you can't just say, hey, I'm coming over to your house, I'm gonna take away your rulebook, I'm gonna give you this, right? So we have a bit of a burden on ourselves. So I hope this is useful regardless of what kind of game you work on, because there's a really good chance that at some point you will write something down you really regret you wrote. And so I'm hoping I can get you through some of that. This is a book I just did, which really tested this theory. It's called The Maze of Games, it just came out. A lot of what I learned about putting these rules in place was really tested on this, because we had very little space and every word mattered. So if you take some time, if you like what you hear and you want to talk about it more, I can talk like a long time on this subject. Like alcohol helps. So Sean and I just decided that the first rule of writing rules is bourbon. So it might be some of the other rules. But I'm going to focus on non-bourbon related rules for today. And we'll maybe put those back into the list of the top 10 later. So, okay, so welcome to this. You'll note that the name of this panel is 10 Rules for Writing Rules, which is kind of meta, right? Because you should know how to write the rules, and you need to know how to write the rules, right? So my friend Pat Rothfuss had this to say when he heard about the panel, which is that the first rule of Recursion Club is the first rule of Recursion Club. The second rule of Recursion, well, you can see where it goes from there. So yeah, okay, I admit that he kind of got me on that. It's like, yeah, it is kind of weird to talk about rules, but they help. And so I'm going to just go through this. Now, I have another little book here called The Kobold Guide to Board Game Design. We're probably going to do an omnibus edition of this later in the year. But it is a book that has a bunch of essays just like this one. Even if you're not a board game designer, it's pretty cool to see people like Richard Garfield and Steve Jackson and James Ernest just think out loud. And so if you want to check this out, it's pretty neat. And this panel is based on the something I wrote in here that you can see in more detail when you get a chance to do so. So let me just run through these things, and then at the end, we will talk about where I went horribly wrong, okay? They are literally a list of 10 rules. And the first one is use no intermediary terminology. This is particularly bad in video game design. I'm going to give you an example of where something went a little bit askew, and I'm going to use some board games and such to do this. This one is from the game Africa Core, and it says, a hexagonal grid has been printed on the board to determine movement. Hereafter, these hexagons will be called squares. Hexagons can be many things. They can be hexes, they can be spaces, they can be areas. They cannot be squares. And so, but what happened here, I think you can see, is that somebody tried to make it easier on you. They tried to say, well, hexagon's a big word. It's got 7 letters in hexagon. But square only has 6, right? And you've heard of that. Like, you played it on a little Foursquare game with your little kickball when you were a kid, so you probably have some idea what that is, but you've never heard of a hexagon. No. See, the point being that this barrier was just thrown in the way of the player understanding the game. Because what they did is said, don't worry, we got you. We're not going to tell you what the thing is. We're going to tell you what we think you think the thing should be, and you're not going to agree with them. There's all sorts of times this happens. It's particularly disastrous in localization. We did a game called Gloria Mundi, where the publisher decided that what he really wanted was to have us make cards and such that could be translated into any language. So his solution to the fact that we had these English language cards was to suggest that we do them all in Latin, a language that nobody speaks. Thus we will confuse everybody equally. So, I mean, you know, you will see this a lot, right? You'll find it a lot when you see symbology in video games especially, right? So you have to know that the little blue squiggle, that's your power, and the little red squiggle, that's your toughness, right? If you write the word toughness, you might not have to worry about that. But it is certainly the point where there's a step in here that you're putting into the player's way that says, I got you on this, you're gonna be fine, and they're not. So think about calling the thing what it is. If you're writing a game that uses something called an attack, don't call it a salvo unless for the rest of your life you want to call it a salvo, right? And you can't jump back and forth. There's a designer here named Jonathan Tweet who once came up with the following rule, which I think is pretty brilliant. Things are the same or they are different. What that means is, if you write something called one thing, it stays that thing for the rest of its life. It does not become something else and make you hope that you understood the transition from step 1 to step 2. And another thing is a different thing, and it's called something else. So again, this can be helpful. I highly recommend you use it as a weapon. When somebody comes down at you and says, don't worry, I got this great idea. This is how you stop them. Use phrases like use no intermediary terminology. This one's also useful. Use real words. This is from the game Advanced Squad Leader. I will read it now. To myself. Look, this game is a great game, and this rule is a great rule, or at least it's a moderately good rule. So what it's saying is that when a vehicle comes under attack, for example, versus a non-concealed, non-aerial defender's declared first fire attack on it, a vehicle may attempt to bounding first fire, D 3.3, it's MA/other F, I'm sorry, I was going to use real words. What it says is it can fire back, but with not all the bells and whistles that it could have done if it was its turn to attack, right? That's a perfectly valid rule. Shows up in a lot of real-time strategy games, right? Is if you deploy something, you get some options to it, but if it is attacked, it will operate on its own and do less than it would normally do if you were controlling it, right? So that's a great rule. The problem is the developers of this game believed that this was something that people could understand, and they believe that the phrase bounding first fire is a verb. This is not how we talk. This is not what people do. But yet, this is in just about every game, and it's in every Brady strategy guide. Right? I mean, this is not what you want to see when you open up something that tells you how to play the game. We are in the world of tutorials now, and even they could get out of their own way and just say, I'm going to tell you how to do something and then you go do it. But no, this shows up even in tutorials. All sorts of things will pop on the screen, teach you all sorts of acronyms, teach you all sorts of things, and you'll forget to actually learn how to play the game. This is an important step in playing a game. And so, I look at this rule and I say, if I have, this is one paragraph, by the way, the whole game is really and I do know how to play it, but I am never going to, any of you, I'm never going to let any of you learn from the rules. I will come to your house.
Where do we sign up?
I don't know. All right, so these are fairly obvious. Not everything is obvious. This is not obvious. make no more work than necessary. You're a game designer probably, or somebody who works with a game designer, and you probably think that playing games is fun. You're wrong. Playing games is work. That's why we do it. It's something where we get to sit down and we get to do the work of playing a game as opposed to the work of doing work. But more work is not necessarily better than less work. And in this case, it could be disastrous. So this is from the worst role-playing game of all time. It is called The World of Cinnabar. And I'm going to explain this rule to you. Fate, that's the name of the game master in this game. I told you it's the worst RPG of all time. Makes a percentile die roll to determine whether an empty ship will be safe or not. The first roll is a 33. This indicates there's a 33% chance of the boat remaining safe. Fate then rolls again. The resulting roll of 40 indicates their ship won't be there upon return. How and when the ship is lost is up to fate. What's the percentage chance that the ship is lost?
68.
Anybody?
16.
It's 50%. You're rolling 2 percentile dice, right? You're rolling 1 to 100, and then rolling it again to see if you hit that number, right? This could have been one roll, right? But it isn't, because this guy's cleverer than I am. And so, by the way, I'm using a lot of simple declarative sentences in this talk. I hope that's not offending anybody. I mean, I wouldn't want to come across as being a dogmatist or anything like that. But pay attention to my goddamn rules. So, what happened here is that this seemed right to the game designer. Also, his name is Raven C.S. McCracken. That seemed right too. So, was that not nice? I'm sorry. Did I mention I started a developer conference today? No, so like, take a look at this, right? I mean, you can see the problem built into the rules, but the inherent problem is that the person reading this has to figure out, is deluded into believing that there is in fact something other than a coin flip going on here. And probably the game designer knows that and wouldn't want to say it's a coin flip. But this is more work than you want people to do. And you'll find this, like I said, you'll find this in tons of games where you just go, why are we doing this? Why aren't we just playing the game? Well, this is why. Okay, rule 4 is add flavor, but not too much flavor. This is from the game Hatfields and McCoys. This entire rule book is written like this. If one of your other players' alias is in the river, all your bows within 4 spaces got to mosey on over to her space and stack with her. Any bows who gets to her has to fight while the rest of the bows close by just stands there gawking. Okay, that's pretty awesome. Let's give that credit, right? But this rule book is 16 pages long. So I'm not really sure that I really want to be here that long, right? I mean, like I get what the person's going for. Flavor's great, right? And you will find this in any time somebody has decided to do a video game tutorial and they've decided it'd be best to do it in a clown voice, right? Right? Or an ancient Mayan priest or something like that. Well, you know, sometimes your narrator should actually just be, well, you, a guy, a person, a woman, right? Just be the person that you need to be to get the person to know something. Like I said, this isn't bad. It's funny. I like funny. But it's a bit much. And you will find that you can start this process thinking it's great. And by the time you're done, you want to leap off a bridge. Because you can't come up with any more synonyms for a gawking. So, I mean, you can see where I'm going with this. I don't want to say don't ever do this. What I want to say is know why you're doing it, and importantly, for God's sake, stop. Rule 5. Write text no smarter than your reader. Readers are wonderful things. You would like to keep them. You do not get many chances to do so. And so this is a game called De Bellis Antiquitatis, which should tell you something. And it contains an interesting rule here at the end. It says, it starts out by saying, well, it sort of says, get a board or table and put some stuff on it, right? But at the end it says, the battlefield is now notionally bisected twice at right angles to its edge to produce 4 equal quarters. Can anybody tell me what this looks like?
2 by 2.
Go ahead. Yeah, it looks like Foursquare. Was anybody worried that it was gonna be hard to communicate? That you're gonna draw 1 horizontal line which will cross 1 vertical line? Apparently we were, right? Apparently we needed to make sure that we did not end up with, I don't know, a W? Like I'm trying to figure out how you actually accomplish this process and produce a bad result. And I guess that's what they were trying to avoid. But this is not a way to talk. My friend James Ernest wrote a game called Pontifex, in which I believe was inspired by this De Bellis Antiquitatis paragraph. I'm going to read to you from it. The rules section begins, to begin, create a playing field as follows. From any point in the upper left-hand northwest quadrant of a sheet of paper, proceed 1 inch east and create a 3-inch line bearing due south 3 inches. Duplicate this line 1 inch further east. These are the lines of Versailles. Then, from the terminus of the second line of Versailles, proceed 1.41 inches northeast and create a 3-inch line bearing due west. Duplicate this line 1 inch farther north. These are the lines of the Commonwealth. Anybody know what this game is?
Tic-tac-toe.
Yeah, it's tic-tac-toe. And the thing is, James is kidding, right? I mean, these guys aren't kidding. These guys know what they're trying to do, and they happen to be wrong about it. So I want to teach you a trick. This is a method that I've used that helps me figure out whether I've gone terribly astray. It's called the Flesch-Kincaid grade level formula. I wouldn't recommend trying to memorize the numbers here, right? But I'll say it out loud in case you can't read it. The grade level of your text is 0.39 words divided by sentences plus 11.8 times your syllables divided by words minus 1 is 15.59. That's really precise. I mean, that's hyper precise. But what that tells you is that when you run this paragraph through that formula, the grade level of this paragraph is 13.22, sophomore in college. I hope you're not betting your game on everybody being a sophomore in college who plays it, because I don't think you'll get very good results. I get asked a lot, what grade level should I shoot at? And there is definitely lots of room for discussion on that. I'll give you an example. The word wizard is learned roughly at grade 2. Thanks, Harry. The word sorcerer is learned roughly at grade 7. To me, those words are, well, they're not interchangeable because they mean different things in my game, but they're meaningfully similar words. But choosing one of them means Johnny can't play, right? And I want Johnny to play. So I'm going to pick wizard over sorcerer if my game foolishly doesn't have both of those. which it might. So anyway, it's a nice little thing. It's a nice little tool. Don't do it to yourself all the time. Like, don't run your letters to grandma through this. But it's nice to know that there is actually something that you can use that will tell you the answer. Am I shooting too high? This next one hurts. If you can hold yourself to this rule, you'll be a better game designer. If you can't, well, what's the opposite of that? Discard rules that cannot be written. So many rules cannot be written. This is from a very popular game called Magic the Gathering. When I told the designers of Magic that I was including them in this presentation, they said, "It's dead ringers, isn't it?" This text says, "Destroy 2 target non-black creatures unless either one is a color the other isn't." Cards in Magic the Gathering can have anywhere from 0 to 5 colors. So for example, the card Dracoplasm, I think, so Dracoplasm is blue and red, right? And Horned Kavu is green and red. So both of them are clearly red, because it says so, right? But one of them is not blue, and the other of them is not green. So when they're both present, then this effect applies. But when only one of them is present, then this effect does not apply, unless one of them is black. This is not a good card. I don't care if you won your Grand Prix with it. This is a terrible idea for a card, because no one knows what it says. Like, you can walk into any retail shop in America that sells Magic and say, "Tell me what this says." You'll get 9 different answers from the same person. It has to go. I know it's fun. I know you made your deck out of it. I know that as a designer, you're hoping that your promotion is riding on this. It's not. Make a better card. Don't write rules that can't be written. Rule 7. Take a breath. This is the rule from Axis and Allies from 1984 about industrial complexes. I'm going to read it aloud. 3 important rules about industrial complexes have already been stated. 1, newly purchased units you bought at the beginning of your turn in Action 1 can only be placed in territories with industrial complexes that you have owned since the beginning of your turn. 2, newly purchased industrial complexes can be placed only in territories that you have owned since the beginning of your turn. And 3, original industrial complexes, those that you started the game with, have unlimited production. That is, you can place any number of newly purchased units on a territory with an original complex, and new industrial complexes, those that you purchased and placed or captured during the game, have limited production per turn. That is, the number of newly purchased items can be placed in a territory with a new complex is equal to the income value of that territory. Anybody count? Who counted? Who counted how many breaths I took? 6 is exactly right. I know, because I was dying. This sentence, not paragraph, is 147 words long. I got the responsibility to reboot Axis and Allies in roughly 2003, and I decided that my version of this sentence would be less than that. I call that helping. There's no reason for this. And yet, there's people who can't seem to realize that, I mean, if you've ever read anything on a Reddit forum, you know that this is in fact how people write these days. We have to stop them. There's more of them than there are of us. Rule 8. Go easy on the eyes. I don't need to read this, I just want you to look at it. This is from a game called Magic Realm. It's as good as the world of Cinnabar. It also seems to think that every word is important. Because if you are not focused on the fact that the chest and the remains of the thief and the moldy skeletons and the toadstool circles are the most important things you've ever seen in your life, then you probably can't play this game. So, by the way, or TWT cards. That's really cute. All right, so, but yeah, I mean, look, there's going to be a point It's not just the big capital letters, by the way. Why is treasure capitalized? Right? Look at that. The second word of the sentence is capitalized. To define something that, by the way, when referred to with the word within in the middle of it, must be in super caps, right? But sight cards. Are you going to accidentally refer to something else as sight cards in your game? Right? You're not, right? There's every now and then you need to capitalize something. Every now and then, like, so there's this game I worked on called Balance of Power, which had something called, it had king actions and such, and it also had general actions. Those are the actions taken by a general. I'm capitalizing that because if you hear about something called general actions, you might just service all the actions, right? Never any point in your life are you going to come up with another definition of sight cards, right? You probably don't ever want to use that term anyway, because somebody's going to say, "You mean I can see them?" But you know, I mean, this is terrible. Don't do this. And by the way, the whole game, like this. This one's very subtle. There's a general rule about playtesting, which is, for God's sake, playtest your games. But this one is pretty important. Get your final version playtested, right? Show it to somebody who hasn't seen it before, because you can't see it anymore. It's a blur to you. This is a game that James and I wrote called Lords of Vegas. It's a pretty good game. It has this rule in it. During step 2 of your turn, you may perform these actions in order to manage your holdings. These actions are build, sprawl, remodel, reorganize, and gamble. You may perform any of these actions in any order, and all of the actions other than gamble may be performed multiple times. Sounds pretty good, right? I'm going to read it again. During step 2 of your turn, you may perform these actions in order to manage your holdings. Well, we didn't see that. But boy, did the forums see it. Right, all of a sudden, like you can't see that coming. But boy, is that different. Right? The phrase "in order to" is something I use on a daily basis. It means something. It means this. It means put it in the right order. But I didn't know that. And so this game has, you know, it's not errata. We just tell people, don't do it like that. 2 sentences later, you're contradicted, right? 2 sentences later, it says you can do it in any order. But, you know, if we showed it to somebody else, maybe they catch that. Maybe they see that. All right, rule 10. This is the most important rule of all. Fix it in post. I wrote a game, or I worked on a game called Betrayal at House on the Hill. This is from the FAQ. Why is the underground lake on the upper floor? See, it's a special kind of levitating lake. And no, it's a misprint. This is a huge error. This is the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, right? Because it's just like you flip over a card and you're like, oh, I got a card on the upper floor, and wait, is this 3 floors down? Generally, they don't have lakes above things. So you fix it, right? I mean, nothing you do is going to be perfect. These are rules that are about trying to make sure that the first shot you get is nice. And we have this game, the Pathfinder Adventure Card game, and its FAQ is longer than the internet. I mean, it is unthinkably broken. But you know what? It's usually because we were just not quite precise enough. We're just a little bit better. Might have hit it. And you know, I can live with that. Like I got a very talented team of developers. I work with very talented editors, and we miss stuff all the damn time. Doesn't matter. Like, nobody's going to jail for this, son. But it's still important to try to apply, or at least for me anyway, to apply the first 9 rules so that I can avoid dumb stuff like this. Because I've been hearing about this for pretty much 12 straight years. And so I wish it hadn't happened. So yeah. So those are the 10 rules, but I can't leave without a special bonus rule. Don't be the wizard. There's a book called Encyclopedia Magica Volume 1. It is Dungeons and Dragons supplement. And some editor decided, I don't want to spill any stories out of school, but Doug was told that the word mage was going to change to the word wizard in the new edition of Dungeons and Dragons. And he did a thing. He did, you know, the little find replace thing. You know, sometimes when you look for a word, you can like go one at a time through all the other things. That takes a long time, right? It's just better to just hit replace all and then send the book to press. So the wizard. Anytime like the spell mirror image came up, you know, look at an image in a crystal ball. You look at that eye wizard in the crystal ball. Things doing 200 points at the wizard. I terrify my editors with this story. I let them know that if anything like this ever happens, not only will they be unemployed, they will be unemployable. And then I cackle and walk away. Because this isn't you. You don't want to be Doug. My friend Dave has a story that when he showed up to work at TSR back in the day, and he got an assignment, and he was just like, okay, it's a nice, boring assignment. And he said to his cubicle mate, he said, well, at least I have standard. I mean, at least I just have to not, make the wizard happen again. And the guy said, it wasn't my fault. Like, you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be the it wasn't my fault guy. I've been the it wasn't my fault guy. Not a good guy to be. So anyway, those are some rules I use to avoid being that guy. So those are my rules. Did that all help? Is that cool? People like that? I got some more time. I want to take some questions maybe, if anybody has anything they want to talk about. Doesn't have to be about this. There's a microphone right there. I would love you to come up there so I don't have to repeat your question. Got it. Which is
this isn't exactly a question, but the style guide for an art project that we got at one point was all written in an accent.
Sure. That's what you want your style guide to be.
It was horrible.
You want your style guide to be saying things like, imagine a world. No, I want to know what color red you use. What Pantone is it? Right? It shouldn't have any words at all. Yeah, I want to see that. That sounds horrible.
So right now, currently, I work in the actual industry as a game designer for electronics, but I really want to kind of move into board games, because I love board games.
Yeah.
How do you make that first step? Because I still haven't really found a good way to do it.
Well, being inordinately rich helps. That's a really good way to become a board game designer. I mean, there's my rule, not rules. I was talking about rules. Apparently, everything in my life is rules now. My recommendation has always been be the person known for that one thing, right? The one thing. People keep talking about that thing. You know that thing? That's the guy who made the thing. She did it. She's amazing. Can you imagine what else she could do with other things, right? Just make something that people talk about, right? I mean, I got a game just the other day from a designer who I'd never heard of, named Avery McDonaldo, and it's called The Quiet Year, and it looks phenomenal. I haven't played it yet. It's a map drawing game.
It's so good.
It's so good.
It's
right?
incredible.
It's so good, right? So I read it from cover to cover. I just haven't played it, but I want to do that. And now Avery is the person who did that game.
He did that thing.
So if that game was good, well, what's the next game, right? And so just that's my recommendation: is make something that everybody can't stop talking about, and you'll be in it.
One thing to rule them all.
Don't be embarrassed.
Well, yeah, don't be. With one small exception.
Is there a game whose rulebook is so memorable to you for being just fantastically well written?
Oh yeah, you mean are there good things? Yeah, that's not anywhere near as fun as this stuff. Yeah, sure. Let's see. What did I really enjoy reading? Well, I mean, I'll just go back to what I just said. Like the Quiet Year book, right, is written in an interesting style. It's not Hatfields and McCoy's, right? It's like it's written in this sort of we concept. So we, the players, are going to do this, right? There's a facilitator in the game, the game master, but we're doing this, right? And I just couldn't stop reading it. I understood everything about how to play the game without even blinking, because every sentence made me want to keep reading more. You know, I mean, there are people who are just very, very precise, and that's great. And there are people who are very, very colorful. Like, you know, some of the French board game designers tend to write very, very prosaically in French, but it comes out pretty awesomely when it's translated. So if you read the rule books of Antoine Bauza's stuff, it's going to be pretty great. I mean, so yeah, there's lots of great things. You know, I mean, I guess this is a terrible thing to say. The best ones are the ones you can't think of, right? They're the ones that never stopped you, that you just blew through, and you go, oh yeah, we're playing the game in 20 minutes. It was great, right? Like those are and I can't give you a list of those because I can't even think of what they are. Right? Go ahead.
So about Rule 1, so at DigiPen we have the TF2 game, and we have to make a board game out of TF2, and so I don't have much of a choice on what I can like call the control point.
Sure.
So I had to, and I wanted to have like tokens that told like how much progress was being made controlling the control point. So I called those control point tokens, but I also need victory points because they were like, I don't know what else to call them. There's no like magic like source that you're getting in the game because it's TF2. And like I ended up having like 2 token things, and
2-point token things.
2-point tokens, yes.
That's terrible, don't do that. Do better. Yeah, I mean, so I guess at this point, I've developed a pretty large lexicon of things I can steal from. I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but I mean, like, you know, I know what most games call things, and then every now and then I go, I'm gonna need to call this thing that. And I'm sorry, dude, that made that other thing, but I stole your stuff, right? And so, but yeah, I mean, you can get yourself trapped. Look, I mean, it doesn't sound like, you can be, like, some of us get the great joy of doing a lot of licensed games. Sean Carnes just had a heart attack. You know, and you get told what you have to do rather than get to invent what you have to do. Like you get an assignment essentially, and that's where you have to be really, really good at your job, because the point at which the intellectual property meets the rule book is not the point where the rule book should give way. Right? It's not the point where the tutorials suddenly be 15 minutes longer. I heard a great story today about, and I love both these games, about Hearthstone and the Magic the Gathering video implementation. And one of them just took 15 minutes longer to get into. I'll bet you can guess which one. Right? I mean, and that's because there's all this barrier in the way. All the things that are control points and victory points are the things that are stopping you from enjoying the game. So, yes, sir.
Do you have any general thoughts on maybe these sort of tie together? Teaching like sequential like order for writing rules, and sort of and also managing complexity within rules and sort of breaking that apart.
Those are very different things, but
they are. Well, they sort of tie in.
I'll tackle them separately. Yeah, we fight over this all the time. So the first question is, sequential ordering of rules. And this really does apply to video games a lot, because the concept of being introduced to stage 1, then stage 2, then stage 3 is pretty important. But you can't understand any of those things until you understand the general nature of what you're trying to do. And so the thing that gets into a massive war is, do we talk about the thing that you have to know to understand everything? Or do we talk about the first thing and assume you don't understand everything, but we'll get you there, right? Because the second one, you can actually start playing, right? And that's kind of a big deal. So, yeah, when we were doing the Pathfinder game, there's a giant section on what the card types are. And every section before that talks about those card types, but you might not know what those are, right? Because they're on page 16 and beyond, right? And so sequence matters a lot, but it can't be the only thing you're beholden to, because general comprehension matters probably even a little bit more than the staging that you need to do to get through your tutorial or your rulebook. As far as complexity goes, I mean, this is a giant bugaboo that everybody talks about but nobody really understands. Is it hard? Is the question you need to ask yourself. And then you need to ask yourself, but imagine if I didn't know how to play the game, right? Because it's always harder. Like anything you do, it's always harder. And so I just, as a general rule, I go in expecting, in my head I've kind of got a firing squad in my brain of like what's first against the wall when the complexity hammer comes down. And usually those are things that I'm not attached to, like they're written by my fellow designers. So, Gaby smiled. I mean, it's just, it's too complex. Whatever it is too complex.
Thanks.
Threes is not too complex. Very few other things are.
So I suspect I know your answer to this, but I'm very curious to hear you say it. At what point, when you start on a new game project, do you begin playtesting?
Well, I sure would like to have some of it in my hands. Like, that's often the barrier, right? We are struggling with the latest Pathfinder set because we've written a lot of cards and we've never put them into card form, so we have no idea what they do. But I mean, real early is the answer to the question. Usually, I work with a set of game developers who are just saints. I mean, because I'll show up with something and I'll go, this isn't going to work. But at the end of this discussion, end of this playtest, maybe we'll think of something that does, right? And so, a lot of my games are just like, I've got a concept and I just got to play it to know anything about what it does. And so those first few sessions often are pretty revelatory. They require some thick skin because I might really like what I came up with, but that's usually the stuff that has to go. So yeah, pretty early, and then for the rest of my life.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Come on, you're gonna leave me standing up here for 10 minutes just staring at you? I can't do that. Because I'm not moving.
So after the playtesting, when do you first start writing rules?
Yeah. So there's a bit of a problem with that question. The question is, after playtesting, when do I first start writing rules? And that presumes that there's a nice orderly progression of events that occur. Once again, my game developers are saints.
I am kind of begging that question.
Sure. I write something called a procedural document. Procedural document tells me the thing that's supposed to happen. It's not actually the thing I give to anybody else to play the game. It's just there to tell me and the people who are playing the game what's supposed to happen. The reason I call it a procedural document is the minute I start calling it the rules, then I start caring what it says. But up until that point, it's just like, hey, this is just something you can do, right? It's not really a thing yet. And so I get those out real early, and they are always living documents. But if you played any of my games recently, you know my rule books are always living documents long after they're released. And so yeah, I mean, real early and a lot.
And do you give those out to like blind playtesters, or are they internal?
No, God, no. What the hell's wrong with you, man? You want to be a coronary? I had somebody post a playtest card on the forum yesterday. It was after the game was released. They posted the original version of the card Goblin Keelhaul. And I came down on them like a rain of concrete.
Did you Goblin Keelhaul them?
I Goblin Keelhaul them. I was like, dude, what are you doing? It's a playtest card. And it's like, okay, we won't do that again, but if you don't mind me asking, why do you feel that way? I was like, well, I gave him 3 answers. Professionally, there's sometimes what you're seeing in a card is something I might not want to do now, but I might want to do in the future. And if we tell everybody now, then when I tell them about it in the future, they go, oh yeah, that thing. Well, weren't you going to do that like a long time ago? Like, that's no good. Procedurally, sometimes playtest materials represent a path of iterations. And it's not important what the steps on the path are, it's only important where we end up. And so if we talk about, I might have sent something out intentionally to find out whether or not it was broken, not to actually print it. Personally, the third answer, because that stuff is embarrassing, man. Seriously, I don't need that out in public. I'm perfect. I don't need anybody showing people what I said. That stuff's terrible. So yeah, I mean, yeah, no way would I give that stuff out. Go ahead.
Hi. So we're making a kind of bizarre game where one person needs to defuse a bomb and they don't know how to do it. So the other players have this manual with all the rules on how to defuse the bomb. And it means that interpreting rules is very much like a huge part of the game.
Sure.
But we're finding as we make the rules less ambiguous and more succinct, they start to look all kind of the same.
Yeah, they start to be less fun.
Yeah. So we're finding it's hard to introduce variety without introducing bad rules that could be ambiguous or full of like flowery language. Do you have any advice on like where you can stretch things so that so other than just adding a bit of flavor, we do have some flavor, but when it comes to like the meaty parts of the rules, we take it out because people can't read it.
It can be that way, right? I got a game recently that I had to look at that sounded really great until I discovered that it was basically literally just roll the die, and if you succeed, you get a point. And I was like, but the whole story, everything you set up was great. How do we get to you roll a die and if you succeed, you get a point? I was like, because that's the game. And I was like, well, okay, but why did you tell me this awesome story, right? Your story is awesome, right? We're all defusing a bomb.
Yeah.
And so at the point in which you start to feel fatigue, you're gonna have to roll back a little bit. You're gonna have to let go of your desire for precision and make sure that what you're doing is making a fun game.
Okay.
But I know it's really hard. The short answer to this is really, really, really hard.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
It's really weird that you pulled up that slide because that's actually what I was going to ask about.
I'm like this with you, man.
So I was wondering how much flavor is too much flavor, because that's a really good line.
I know, isn't it great? Don't you want to read that whole rule book?
Yes.
No.
I want a bedtime story of that.
I know, seriously, man. There was a game called NATO that had a rule. It was a board game from, I think, like 1973. It said, NATO has rules covering the use of tactical nuclear weapons. To simulate the use of strategic nuclear weapons, simply soak the map with lighter fluid and apply a flame. That's too much flavor. There's your benchmark. I mean, there's no clear answer, but I mean, it's like, yeah, there's a point at which you got to stop.
Thank you.
You spoke earlier. You referred to the juggling act or the creative tension between the staging, sequencing. So let's get these players just playing this thing before they understand it, and giving them the big picture before you get into the stages of the game. And can you speak more, elaborate on this creative tension
in
and
this
what
voice?
and in a voice that delights
I'll
you?
give you an example that is very near and dear to my heart right this weekend. We are, as I said, we are doing this great launch of the Fantasia game, and it is phenomenal. I mean, it's really one of the 10 best games I've ever played. It's brilliant. We have to train our demo staff to do that game, and I was concerned that we didn't give ourselves enough time, because what I want is people to understand the game. I want them to know why. Like, I can teach you how to play the game in 15 minutes, but I want you to get it. I want you to understand why there's this thing called the noise that is running through the universe, and we have to use these master these musical strains to knock it back, and how each realm is different and manipulable and all that. And all that's too much, because you just need to know how to play the game, right? It came over, like, if my demo to you is me telling you this fantastic story and you never get your hands on the controllers at all, actually there aren't any, but whatever, then I've made a terrible error, right? So, I mean, I would say that your best bet is to have a really good short version of the stuff you need to know before you can understand it and get it out of the way, so you can put the controller in people's hands, so you can get them rolling the dice, so you can get them opening the rule book, or sorry, opening the setting rather than the rule book. You know, I mean, that's what I do, but it's really, really difficult to let go of the part where you told the really awesome story you just came up with.
So pithy.
Pithy.
To start.
That sounds like a pretty good play.
Thank you.
I don't know if you'd have anything to say about this, but do you have any ideas on how to teach the rules when you can't tell the rules?
What does and I can't tell them mean?
When you don't have text.
Oh, when you don't have text. Oh, sure. Yeah, actually I do. So, yeah, we've done that a few times. So, it's really important. So this comes up a lot in video game stuff. I worked on a game, Alice in Wonderland's mobile game for the movie, and you know, the short answer to that for that game was get them doing the things that they didn't need an explanation of how to do before we needed to explain something. Right, so get them into playing the thing that is intuitive before we have to break out a character and tell them the thing. So there aren't any words in the introductory text in the beginning of that game, but eventually, we'll have to tell you something, right? Or at least we got to go through a process of showing you. I mean, you know, I have hit points where I have had to break down and say, I'm sorry to do this, but let me talk to you for a while. When what I want to say is, here's this awesome thing, just keep playing it. And, you know, people will listen to you for a little while, and they'll tune you out. But you get them for that little while, it's probably going to go okay.
Cool.
All right. I think that's about it for this. Is this good? Do people like this? Well, good, because we got some more amazing stuff coming up for the rest of the convention. I really want to hear you guys' feedback. Just come find us and tell us what you think of the convention, because we really like your opinion. Thanks a lot, everybody.